where we are now. So some of the negatives are, obviously unemployment rate is still high. It did go down to 8.3%, which is good, but unfortunately there's still a lot of people out of work. Did anybody see 60 Minutes on Sunday night? There was a great piece on there about an unemployment office in Connecticut. They're actually taking people that have been out of work their unemployment benefits have run out. And they're doing internships. These are people in their 50s. They're doing internships for companies, and then they like them, they hire them. Because there's this real stigma about being unemployed. And even in ads, they say only apply if you are currently employed. You know, so it's really tough out there. But there are some things happening. Like I said, that program in Connecticut, there's some new things going on. Economic growth is still modest, even though it's coming back. Usually after a recession, we have strong economic growth. We have all this pent-up demand and everything, but we don't have that. A lot of that has to do with the deleveraging, with the amount of debt that people are paying off and so forth instead of borrowing more. And anybody that's tried to get a mortgage knows what that's like, because they do not give out mortgages like they were a few years ago. So the credit is not as loose, it's much tighter, etc. So there's not as much money to be able to spend and so forth in the economy. And then, of course, the Euro era sovereign debt problems still remain. You know, there's still Spain and Italy and Portugal and Ireland and so on. We keep getting downgrades. But I think it's pretty obvious that the European Central Bank is not going to let a collapse happen like the one that happened to Lehman Brothers in 2008. I feel very strongly I don't think they're going to let it happen. They're printing money. They have another tranche of money going out to banks coming up very shortly here. So I think they're going to really avoid all that. And the housing, of course, is still weak. Positives. I personally have been contributing to number one. Retail sales have been solid. I don't know, did anybody notice it when they were out shopping? It seems like stores are crowded and so forth. To me, people are spending money. So, and I'm definitely contributing to that. Consumer debt load is easing. So people have paid off a lot of debts, but you know, then there's pent-up demand. You look around, you know, needs to be replaced in your house, or this needs to be done, or whatever, and it's okay, time now. Now it's time. I feel like my job's stable. I feel like I can afford to do this. Consumer confidence hit an 8-month high in December, so that's very positive. And after-tax corporate profits are just at record highs. Companies are actually in fabulous shape. They paid off a lot of debt, or they refinanced it to very low rates. They're making a lot of money. You know, what 2008 did in 2009, it wiped out all the weak companies pretty much. I mean, there's still some problems in there, like Eastman Kodak declared bankruptcy, you know, recently. But in general, it's much, much stronger. Companies are really doing well. And I think what we're probably going to see more of, you know, this year are actually more mergers and acquisitions. And we're seeing that a lot in the healthcare field and so forth. The big pharma companies do not want to develop their own drugs. They'll go out and buy other companies that have, you know, have promising products in the pipeline and so forth. Woody Allen, he's a very optimistic guy. So he gives us two paths. One leads to despair and utter hopelessness, and the other is extinction. So, I don't know. I think we have another choice besides that. Okay, so some surprises. This is from TheStreet.com, Doug Cass. He believes that the market is going to approach an all-time high in 2012. Growth in the U.S. economy accelerates as the year progresses. Former presidents Bill Clinton and George Bush form a bipartisan coalition and persuade both parties to address our fiscal imbalances. I would love to see that. That would be fabulous. Which George? I think it's the younger George. Yeah, George W. Yeah. You never know. You never know what it's going to take. I I mean, who would have thought we would have had these issues, that were happening last year in Europe even, getting to this crisis stage, and that actually could pull it off. I mean, they did all pull together, all those countries, and they are pulling it off. So it just goes to show you when you're up against the wall what you can do. Because, actually, what they face is so much worse. If Greece were to leave the euro, the value of their currencies would be so low. I mean, people wouldn't be able to afford so many things. So there are real reasons why they should be, doing what they're doing. So Goldman Sachs, their forecast for 2012 is real GDP up by 1.8% and global up by 3.2%. S&P 500 operating profits $100 a share. Right now it's around $93 a share, so profits continuing to increase. And a target of $12.50, so that would be low because we're right around $13.63 right now. So that would be a drop of about 100 points on the S&P. And a low inflation rate, 1.7%. And that the U.S. Treasury yields, which have gone from 1.9 up to 2, would go to 2.5% by the end of the year. That may not seem like a big increase, like 0.5%, what is that? But that's actually a 25% increase of where it is right now. So as far as pricing goes for these instruments, it's huge. It would be a really big deal if that happened. So, of course, what to watch for in 2012, possible recession in Europe due to the austerity measures. A risk that the euro crisis could deepen. That seems to be somewhat off the table right now, but that could definitely come back again this year. Slower growth in China. Interesting, the Chinese, I mean, they're growing, their economy's growing. You read about how the citizens are starting to become more prosperous, a certain segment of the citizens, but they're limited in what they can invest in. They don't have the freedoms that we have. We can invest in European companies, Asian companies. I mean, we have such an unbelievable menu. They're very limited in what they can invest in. So they put a lot of money into property, and they put a lot of money into gold, physical gold, and silver. So their property prices have come down quite a bit, actually, through the end of last year and into this year. And continued record corporate profits in the U.S. So if that happens, then if we revert to the mean, so to speak, that's a technical term, but what that would mean would be a continued increase in the prices of stocks. Because right now, they're not priced at the mean, they're priced below the mean. We do think that housing starts are going to continue to be near record lows. There's just too much of an inventory. I mean, you probably read about it or hear about it. People are living in houses. They want them to stay there even though they're not paying their mortgage because they don't want to have the houses depreciate in value by being abandoned and so forth. So there's going to be a lot of shadow inventory that's going to be coming off at various times. Plus, the government, various state governments just settled with the 5 large mortgage lenders. I think it was last week. Actually, I think they got away with, it sounded like a lot of money, but I think they really got away with a pretty cheap price tag on that. Because people lost their homes. I mean, they were foreclosed on by these robo-signings, and they're getting, $2,000, no house. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But there is still a lot of talk about doing something with, lowering, the actual mortgages and so forth that people have that are underwater. I mean, there's just a huge amount of mortgages that are still underwater. So we have ways to go in real estate. I would say commercial real estate different, but housing, is still a problem. And there aren't as many people being able to get mortgages and loans and so forth. So. But there's a huge demand for rentals, apartment rentals and so forth, huge demand, because people can't get mortgages. And, frankly, a lot of people really got burned in the whole experience, so they might not ever want to buy a house again. And that's why I just mentioned the shadow inventory of homes. Unemployment rate, 8.3% now. That's improved, so that's a good thing. The projection is job growth will just keep pace with population growth, so we won't really see a meaningful reduction in the unemployment rate during 2012. That's going to take a long time because there's this structural mismatch between the skills of the unemployed and what's required. You know, there are jobs out there. There are companies looking for people. But the people that are looking don't have the skills to match the jobs that are out there. So a lot of training has to happen for this. Belt tightening. Federal government belt tightening. You know, we're seeing that in defense already. You know, they're reducing defense spending. And then, of course, state and local government belt tightening. So they're doing what they need to do to balance their budgets. So it does reduce the deficits, but it does lower the spending and reduce economic growth. The one good thing, though, you know, I mean, when there's so much capital out there that can be used, when government's taking it, they're borrowing it and taking it. That's less for private industry to use. And private industry, especially small businesses, are the ones that grow the jobs. You think about it, these companies, when they get big, they get very efficient, right? They don't need as many people to do the work. Small businesses aren't as efficient, especially when they're first starting out. They hire more people. So that continue. This slide is showing the 10-year Treasury. So this goes back into the 60s, and we can see how interest rates climbed over time, all the way up to above 15%. Okay, that was back in the 80s. We had that real. Do you remember? Like, I was pretty young then, but I remember the CDs were really high. Money markets. Remember, you could get like 15% on your money market account. Well, inflation was really high too at the time. And then we've had this long-term down of interest rates. So each of these gray areas represent a recession as well. Some of the things that we're really looking at Watts Wealth Management, like I mentioned earlier, we're looking at that key resistance level in the S&P 500 of 1370. When it gets over that, we're feeling it's going to continue to go up. We could see over 1400 and then mid 1400s by the middle of the year, we're thinking. So there's still some ways to go in the S&P. That could change at any time. I mean, it was a year ago in March when Japan had their tsunami and the nuclear disaster. That has changed things when it comes to energy. Japan, for the first time now, they are running trade deficits because they are importing energy. They are abandoning nuclear power totally, and they are going to natural gas. They are partnering with China, with Australia to develop natural gas fields off of the coast. But until then, who has the most natural gas in the world? We do. Okay? Week after week, we're seeing there are several companies that have the technology to, and you've seen them in cities and so forth. Buses run on natural gas. Trucks run on natural gas. Probably within 10 years, all the trucks in the country will be running on natural gas, liquefied natural gas. The ports have been improved in our country. Our exports have been increasing, and they're increasing because we're exporting energy. We're exporting energy and food. That's how our exports are going up. Yes, food, beef. We have the same amount of cattle, herds of cattle per head, as we did in 1955. But people are eating less meat in the United States, and meat prices are going up, have been going up, because it's being exported. As these countries, as people are making more money and so forth, they want to eat better. You know? So that's what we're exporting.